So today we'll be discussing on fostering collaboration with the private sector for economic opportunities. And this is this is one of the key commitments made by the federal government of Nigeria at the last Global Disability Summit that held in Berlin last year. So we had like 12 thematic areas. Some of those thematic areas that the government made commitments on included inclusive education, employment, humanitarian action, inclusive digital accessibility communications, and so many other commitments. And today we'll be discussing on the role of the private sector in ensuring that we move beyond just making commitments to having concrete these things we can hold on to, just not talk, moving away from policy to action. And then today we have with us Dr. Babarinde, and she'll be providing insights into this beautiful discussion. In the United Kingdom, Japan, South Korea, and Germany. She holds a PhD from the University of Ilorin as well as an MBA. And throughout her career, she has spearheaded national initiatives that have supported and impacted more than 15,000 businesses across Nigeria. She is deeply committed to advancing women's economic inclusion, strengthening MSME development, and fostering, I think I missed that line. So without any further ado, let's welcome her with an inclusive clap for our participants who are deaf. Thank you once more for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, reading your bio, and I just realized that you are well suited for our discussion today, and I can't wait to dive in. So we'll just go straight to the point without beating the bush. So just at the Global Disability Summit that took place last year, which is the GDS, some key, about 4 commitments were made by the Nigerian government. So one of them is that the federal government committed to driving equal employment and economic opportunities for persons with disabilities. So this is what my first question will be embedded on. So from SMIDAN's vantage point, as a private custodian of enterprise growth, how can we strategically shift the national narrative, from treating disability as a corporate social responsibility issue to building a compelling business case for private employers? Can I take the question again? This is fine. Okay. The floor is now open for you, Ma.
Okay. Okay, so from maybe vintage point as the primary custodians of enterprise growth, how can we strategically shift the national narrative from treating disabilities as a corporate social responsibilities due to building a compelling business case for private sectors? I would like to start by saying, well, SMIDAN, let's talk a little bit about SMIDAN and then I answer your question. So SMIDAN is Small and Medium Enterprise Development Agency of Nigeria, was established in 2003 to facilitate the growth and development of the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector. Has been existing ever since with the mission and vision to grow the Nigerian economy by creating an enabling ecosystem for prosperity for the Nigerian business person while establishing a structured MSME sector for sustainable growth. The Director General, Dr. Charles Odi, has been strongly advocating that SMIDAN act as a central hub to assist the MSME with resources, capacity building, and overcoming all challenges that would militate or reduce their growth. To my question, how has SMIDAN been able to shift the national narrative from treating disabilities as a corporate social responsibility issue to building a compelling business case for private employees? I would like to state that people living with disabilities have always been, for lack of a better word, looked down on. Now, one of what this particular event has done is that mentally, Sweden is trying to move from looking at people with disability from the charity perspective to a value creation perspective. And how have we done that? The agency is consciously driving a shift by providing practical tools, capacity buildings, incentives, and showcasing successful businesses where inclusion is delivered with measurable results. What do I mean by that? We have tried and made efforts to tweak some of our activities in recent times, moving away from looking at people with disabilities as charity cases to enterprise cases that helps grow the economy. We have this particular programs that was designed specifically for people with disabilities and also for people that special cases. We call them the specialized skill program. In the past, I can tell you like 3 years ago, we had them put in a class specifically just for them. The reasons why we are doing that is because at that point, we're not seeing them as enterprise, we're not seeing them as organizations or MSMEs that can help the enterprise group, or how do we offer our corporate social responsibility to the society. So capacity building programs were designed, was implemented. One of those capacity building programs is this I'm talking about that happened in Oshun. And it involved providing solar energies for people using Braille. They were majorly targeting the people that had eye impairments. And at the end of the program, with solar energy to be able to power their equipments to be able to read with ease. However, in recent times, as at 2026, we've also done this same program, Specialized Skill Initiative, but it's not targeted at just people with disabilities anymore. We have people with disabilities as part of the participants. We have internally displaced persons as part of the participants. We have people that do not have that have limitation in economic empowerment within the society generally as part of the participants. So we do not exclude them completely anymore. We integrate them with other people in the society, and the capacity building training also has been carried out for the year 2026. You know, we are restricted by budget, so we can only do as much as the budget allows us to do. And from that capacity building program, 5 people with disabilities have been empowered to be able to start their businesses at their doorsteps. The target beneficiaries for that particular program were people that were into GSM repairs. So what am I trying to communicate is we're doing a mind shift. We're not yet there, but we're working at it to have a mind shift to move people from looking at people with disability as charity cases, but people who can change things within the economy. More so, we have the monetizing business case. We're monetizing business cases through incentives. That's another tool that we're using to try to remove people with disabilities from charity cases into thriving enterprises. So the private sector responds, we know the private sector responds to bottom line advantages, meaning bring some incentives around the project. Private enterprises will be willing to key into it if there are benefits. As a result of that, Sweden has collaboration with National Revenue Service, formerly known as Federal Inland Revenue Service. We have collaborations and partnerships with NEPC. We have collaboration and partnerships with Corporate Affairs Commission, CAC, and all of these partnerships is to create incentives. One that is currently running is the 250,000 free registration on CAC for anyone who is interested. I can assure you that people with disabilities were not franchised. They were not eliminated from this. It's open to everybody. It's been running for a while. It's still running now. And the idea is to ensure that the formalized businesses become formal. So these are some of the drives and these are some of the mind shifts that we have been implementing to ensure that people with disability are not charity cases anymore. They are actually looked as people who are treated within the business case and can be part of the MSME ecosystem, effectively contributing to the GDP. Thank you.
Thank you so
I don't know
much.
if that answers your question.
Yes, it does. And it's already giving me an insight to my next question. I mean, I think one of the things that you mentioned that really, really makes me know that Smidan is really up and doing is when you mentioned that Smidan is consciously, because that's what already tells me that you're already getting busy to ensure that you're moving persons with disabilities away from the charity mindset. It already tells me about the intentionality from the SMIDAN. Also, you mentioned something concrete for me about the 5% with disabilities that are empowered. Someone who is empowered can take care of themselves, can live independently. And this is one of the goals for persons with disabilities, for them to be able to live independently in society. This is one of the most concrete things that is making me know, okay, we're already moving away from just commitment to real-time implementation. So thank you so much. And moving to our next question, or before I move to our next question, it has to do with, because you mentioned something just previously, you spoke about how the private sector will not key into certain things until there are benefits, and it's something that Smidan is strongly doing. So the next questions will be dwelling much. So this one, I would just like to have um, more depth to it. So if you can share with us what specific economic incentives, I already know you mentioned some previously, but if you can just, especially maybe this time around, in the aspect of tax framework recommendations, yes, or supportive enterprise schemes, what maybe tax framework recommendation that you have when exploring, how to hire persons with disabilities? Because for many private organizations, when you are telling them things like, oh, you need to hire persons with disabilities, the first question they're going to ask you is, what are the benefits? And there is a statistic that says that the private sector has 80%, strength for employment. So can you shed more light on this, especially as it relates to tax framework recommendations? Because presently we know we are in the renewed hope agenda government, and then we know that tax is taken very, very seriously in this government. So the floor is yours now.
From the point of view of tax is a responsibility that dwells with National Revenue Service. That does not dwell with SMIDAN. However, there are still incentives that we have identified as SMIDAN that are available under the NRS that people with disabilities probably have been taking advantage of, that they're not conscious of, or are yet to take advantage of. So I'll just share a few of them that I have identified. Let's see. Okay, so there's the zero VAT rates for people with disabilities. Any equipment, any medical equipment, any tool that is targeted for people with disabilities, there's the zero VAT rate. So NRS enforces the zero VAT rate, a complete exemption for any tool or any medical equipment that is bought or attained, supplied to people with disabilities or for their use. They do not charge any VAT on them. Also, I do know that that's what I'm trying to say is, if you buy a wheelchair, or you're buying a hearing aid, or you're buying a braille, usually there'll be no VAT on it. That's part of the incentives that the federal government has made available to ensure that people with disabilities are not excluded their included in the benefits within the ecosystem. Now, we also know that for medical services, say public health and specialized medical services by individuals with disabilities, there is also no VAT given to that. So let's go look at it from the point of MSMEs. Let's look at it from the point of employment. They pay the personal income tax, which is the payee tax. There's a relief for it that has been advocated for. I know that the House of Representatives Committee on Disability Matters, has granted total income tax immunity to all people living with disabilities. There has been that advocacy going on. I think it is actually activated now. Then currently, NRS also has shielded low and middle income disabled workers through progressive relief thresholds. So there's some relief thresholds that are made available to people that work within organizations. We also know that there's a minimum wage exemption for anyone that earns less than 800,000. So if your total wage is less than 800,000, there's an exemption that is given. You don't pay tax on that. Also, for people that collect that do gross income thresholds, if you have up to 1.2 million, if I'm not wrong, is explicitly exempted from tax for gross income. If it's less than 1.2 million, if it's above 1.2 million, of course it is taxed. But if it's less than 1.2 million, it is not taxed by payee. What am I trying to say? Majority of the people living with disabilities fall within these spending rackets. So there is some form of tax reliefs that is existing that we may have started enjoying, or that we may choose to enjoy in future, depending on where you work, what you do, and how you do that. I think that already exists right now, that is being implemented. There is also the fact that it's important to know that ultimately the goal is to ensure that MSMEs do not see inclusion as an additional financial burden, because I think that's the driving force behind that. But as an investment support, putting up the right policies, the right incentives, and market opportunities. So that's the thought towards that. As SMIDAN, we may not be able to tell you these are the exemptions. We cannot create exemptions because it's not our mandate. But I do know that NRS has been doing that also. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I mean, this has been very, very eye-opening. I think we need to highlight everything you have said here and share separately. And thank you for clarifying that it is not in the mandate for SMIDAN to, create those tax exemption, but for you to be able to tell us what the NRS is doing toward this is very, very beautiful. I think many persons with disabilities, just like you mentioned, need to take advantage of all these amazing tax relief options that are available. It's just so beautiful to see everything, especially as it relates to medical equipment. I mean, the tax relief on that is really, really going to be a very beautiful, I think, a welcome development to the disability community. So on our own part as JNIP, we're going to do our best to make sure that, we amplify this. We need to create more awareness. Persons with disabilities need to begin to know that, this is available, because if they are not aware that this is available, then they cannot benefit from such schemes. Thank you so much. I think you have also touched a little on my next question. However, because when you answered the first question, you spoke about capacity building. This question is still also about something like that. So here, we just wanted to find out, I know you mentioned that you involve persons with disabilities in your capacity building efforts or endeavors. However, if you could shed some light on how these capacity building programs are designed. Yes, because for the commitment made by the government here focused more on marginalized persons with disabilities. So within the group of persons with disabilities, we know we have generally persons who are blind, persons who are deaf, persons with physical disabilities. These three clusters most times are well known. Some people are not even aware that we have clusters like deaf, blind. Some people do not even consider persons with albinism as people with disabilities. Some people do not even consider people with little stature. So we just wanted to find out how you design your capacity building programs, how inclusive it is for different types of disabilities. The floor is yours now, ma'am.
Thank you very much for that question. So let me start with how we design our programs. Our programs are usually need-based. So what it means is that there's a need assessment carried out, identifying a particular problem and trying to solve that problem. And in the process, we come up with a creation methodology. So we either create with a program or we co-create depending on if we have partners to implement the programs. And these are the basic ways that programs are created. However, this creation and needs assessment is not done by SMIDAN, lack of a better word, head office alone. SMIDAN has offices in 36 states, so we have state offices. We also work with business membership organizations. We work with CBOs, TOs, and even disability-focused organizations. I am sure that we have been interfacing with JONAPID, at least for the year 2026, more closely than we have done in the past years. And all of that is targeted towards working towards designing specific programs that would be inclusive for everybody that is under the people with disability segments, for lack of a better word. Now, I would probably just cite some programs that we have done, including some we had done last year, that it has people with disability also onboarded on the program, and also talk a little bit about what the policy trust for the agency is going forward. We have what we call the National Business Skills Development Initiative, and it's a program that talks to entrepreneurship training, vocational skills acquisition, and also providing of starter packs for people that are interested in the businesses of interest. I am very aware that in 2023, in 2022, and even in 2024, people with disabilities were inclusive as target beneficiaries of the program. And machines such as industrial sewing machines, catering gears, leather works, GSM repairs, and the toolkits were provided to individuals to go run their businesses after about 1 to 2 weeks interaction on a capacity building basis. We also have what we call the Specialized Opportunity Fair. And Specialized Opportunity Fair is talking about organized, dedicated trade and market linkage fairs. It's basically designed for entrepreneurs with specialized needs, showcasing their products, interface with regulators such as NAFDAC, SON, and this is all targeted to secure market access. So if you have a good product, whether you are somebody with disability or not, if you can provide, though this particular project, this particular one I'm talking about is for people with disabilities, but I'm saying that the output from this kind of trainings, we usually showcase such products on our website, showing off the products and also looking for possible linkages for export markets and access to other markets for such products. I can assure you that we do not exclude people with disabilities in it. Then there is also the institutional support and capacity building. Specifically, it was localized in 2 entrepreneurship and self-reliance workshops in Katsina State and in Lagos State. And this was targeted at business membership organizations that run or serve people with disabilities. Now, 2026 specifically, like I said, we had an activity for people with disabilities that empowered them. Why have I gone very that route is to explain that we have never excluded any particular sector amongst the people with disabilities. However, based on the reorientation and better information we have about people with disabilities, which we have just emphasized on, the national policy for the agency has just been reviewed. And as a result of that review, we have ensured that people with disabilities have their own pillar specifically in the national policy, which talks to inclusion, sustainability, and enterprise resilience. So for all these specific people with disability sectors that you have indicated, they would have programs, they would have target inclusion activities that would be designed within the next 5 years, because the policy runs for 5 years. So within the next 5 years, we are trusting and believing that all things being equal, we'll be able to design specific programs that will deal with this particular sector of people, provided the budgets are made available to help them run their businesses better without necessarily being excluded because of any fiscal challenges that they have. So that's really what we are doing regarding that sector.
Wow, thank you so much for this amazing contribution. I mean, so beautiful to see what you are doing to ensure inclusivity in your programs. I mean, you've mentioned quite a lot, and I think already having my book and filled up. And it's also beautiful to see what you are doing. You're planning towards the future, because towards the end of your contributions, you mentioned what you're planning to do in the next 5 years. Yes, it's already showing me the intentionality that Smidan is already putting into all of this. Thank you so much. Let me see. Yes, speaking about co-creation. Yes, that's a very beautiful way to ensure that these programs are inclusive. I could speak on and on because I kept writing while you spoke. Thank you so much. So I'll be moving to our next question. Our next question, maybe not much, just maybe a little contribution for you will be fine here. This particular question, I think, let me look for a better way to rephrase it or reframe it. Because from your previous contribution, you already spoke how, of course, this cannot be achieved by one person. You spoke about collaboration, and I can already see it, because for you to co-create, it means you need to collaborate with other organizations to find out, okay, what are the needs here and there. I can see that there are layers of your collaboration. However, if you can mention how SMIDAN collaborate with regulatory bodies, maybe there's something you have not mentioned previously, just more specifically this time, how you collaborate with regulatory bodies, and the private enterprise, something you've not mentioned before, something totally different from what you mentioned previously. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So our relationship with regulatory bodies, the regulatory bodies are there to ensure compliance. That's basically why they are there. And for us to attain compliance, you need to know for you to be able to make the correct changes. You can't make impact if you don't have the information. So one of the programs that we have created and are running right now is what we call the Weekly Business Clinic. Now, for Weekly Business Clinic, it's an activity that comes up every week on Friday at our Area 11 office. And basically what we do at the Weekly Business Clinic is invite all of the regulators to meet with our MSMEs. It's actually a hybrid program. We have people physically attending and people attending virtually. We have people like NAFDAC, like I said, we have SON, we have NEPC, we have CAC. We even have people that deal with if you're going to retire very soon, some of the organizations that would pension boards and all of that. And basically what this is for is because there are definite expectations for anybody producing a business. There are definite expectations that is expected of you by the regulatory bodies. So we create this platform to allow the regulators engage with the MSMEs. I can tell you for a fact that we have a number of people with disabilities that are part of this platform. Some of them come physically, some join online. And in some cases, we get people who are aides to help interpret, where we have people that probably have hearing challenges for them to be able to understand what is being said by these regulators. And that way they're able to get the right information to be able to enforce compliance. You have the right information, you are able to produce to standards, meeting standard operating practice. And as you meet standard operating practice, compliance is enforced. And this will also help the MSME understand what is required of them and how to achieve it affordably. I can tell you before now that one of the issues we had with NAFDAC was that the processes were a bit too tedious for the MSMEs, not to talk of people with disabilities. And as a result of advocacy over a period of time and interaction with the MSMEs, they've been able to come up with cottage industries. What that means is that I can run my business from my kitchen, still meeting the right compliance standards and being able to sell in the market. And we have, like I said, we have people with disabilities that come for this particular program. So these are some of the things that we try to do to ensure that you meet regulatory standards from the end of SMIDAN. I know that's not exhaustive, but those are some of the things we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is an inclusive clap. I mean, so beautiful to see how you are working, how you're collaborating with these bodies. And I'm so glad this question was asked, because now I've learned about something, the weekly business clinic that you run in your office in Area 11. I think this is something we need to create an awareness from our own end as Jonapit, to tell people within our cycle that this is an initiative they could benefit from. Thank you so much for sharing. So moving to my next question. If you could shed light, maybe 1 minute, 2 minutes, on what the work, the access to work scheme is. Maybe somebody out there is unaware about what that means. And then when you just speak briefly about that, if you can just tell us what SMIDA is doing specifically, you've already mentioned something, but just give us a little overview or a little summary of what the access to work scheme is. Then maybe I'll just ask the next question. Thank you.
So for access to work scheme, basically SMIDAN would be able to strongly provide awareness and advocacy. That's what we may be able to do regarding access to work scheme. And the idea is, between government policies and MSME community, if we are to create a link, the easiest way to do that would be creating awareness to the government and awareness to the community, to the MSME community, for capacity building on businesses, for helping employers understand how to participate effectively in the access to work scheme. Participation should go beyond numbers. There's a need to have joint monitoring with clear indicators covering recruitment, retention, career progress, workplace accessibility, employee experiences. It would be nice if there are specific monitoring and monitoring with clear indicators on that. Because that particular segment is not restricted to SMIDAN alone, we may not be able to take up that responsibility completely. However, we can create awareness about it to the government and to the MSME community. And I would believe that over time, you'll be able to have a more effective access to work scheme space.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, because this answers my question. You're already mentioning what role you're going to play in ensuring that this access to work scheme is well known, and awareness creation will always be a strong point for all of this. So moving to our last question, which is something that is very sensitive to the season we are. This is August 2026, and like we all know it, Nigeria is gradually approaching our 2027 general election. So, of course, we've seen with time that when a new government comes into power, it's like everybody just leaves something that was happening before, and then we are all moving into to a new thing. So this is why this question is quite, or a lack of a better word, is very, very important, and this point. So maybe just moving straight forward to the question. So looking toward the electoral cycle, how is Midan embedding these summit commitments, in its long-term strategic policy framework to ensure that economic empowerment for persons with disabilities remains a permanent public sector priority, regardless of political transitions like we are about to experience? The floor is yours, ma'am.
Okay, I'd like to keep it simple. I'll just simply say that Sweden has embedded disability inclusion within its long-term MSME policy. Why? Because we've been speaking a lot with Jonapid, which is one of the reasons why we had thought in this direction. So you are looking at programs, you are looking at budget, you're looking at guidelines, you're looking at monitoring frameworks, and all of this you are standalone activities that we have included, like I said, in our policy to ensure that it is not a temporal initiative. It is a permanent initiative. So those are some of the things that we are doing against beyond the election period. Once it becomes a policy, like I said, our policy is a 5-year tenure review. So
Yes.
the government policy, MSME policy, is a 5-year tenure government review. So what that means is that even if the government changes, the policy does not change. We are still interested in inclusiveness. We are still interested in strengthening people with disabilities in our economic sector, particularly people that are MSMEs, which are our own targets of interest. We also know that the trade organizations, the BMOs, the CSOs, and organizations that work with disabilities would always exist, whether there is election or not. So targeting most of our activities through these kind of organizations will definitely strengthen the co-creation of the programs that are implemented. And that way, whether election comes or election goes, people are empowered that are within that space. The interventions are intentional to the people with disabilities, and they will remain as permanent public sector priorities since they've been ingrained in our core activities within the agency. So that's basically some of the things we are doing. However, our major goal is to ensure that disability inclusive enterprise development becomes part of Nigeria's MSME development architecture. That's what we're trying to achieve in the long run. Not just the programs that depends on electoral cycle, because electoral cycles will come and go. But once it becomes a MSME development architecture, then it stays. So those are some of the things we can do within our sphere of influence, despite the electoral years. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think the last point you mentioned is really, really more concrete for me. I mean, I look forward to that time where this can be, embedded in the MSME developmental architecture. Thank you so much, Doctor. Do you have any
Thank
final
you.
words for us before we just do a little overview? Yes,
I'd
maybe.
like to say thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I would like to emphasize that SMIDAN is interested in developing the people with disability sector. You are part of our MSMEs. And if you grow, the agency has achieved its mandate and the economy would also grow. Thank you. And one more thing is appreciations from the organizational head. I can assure you that, yes, I'm here representing SMIDAN, but I'm not doing that alone. And we appreciate the opportunity. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your beautiful contribution. And it's so beautiful to see what SMIDAN is doing to ensure collaboration between the private sector and the government. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be looking forward to hosting you some other time to continue this beautiful conversation. Do have a very beautiful evening. Thank you.
And you too. Bye for now.
Bye.